Skyjan Clark here, and for those who know me, this is my 2022 year-end review. 2022, luckily for me, has been a pretty good year. It's been crazy, like everybody's year's been crazy, but it's been a pretty good year. First, I'd like to say I was blessed beyond my comprehension once again. This year, I was able to accomplish many goals that I set out to accomplish since 2020, since 2019, right? So let's just get into it. Highlights of the year. Number one, I had a child. Biggest highlight. Number two, I had two different art shows in 2022 that were a success. And number three, I got accepted into a doctoral program. So I'm now a doctoral student. That being said, I'll go down the list. First, I want to start with the art shows. The art shows exposed to me that I could do this art thing, right? I'm an artist. I can't help it. I'm always going to make art. But, you make art, does it sell? You make art, is it going to go anywhere? And this year proved to me that if I really push it, I can get my art to go to the moon. Proof of this was the 200 people I was able to get with the help of Ticey Bell. The 200 people I was able to get to come to Joliet for a black art show. Now, was there a lot of art that sold? No. But I did sell two pieces of art that were not mine. I helped sell them for this lady. Her name is Janine Conquest. I can't pronounce her name, but she's a French artist, and I was able to sell her art. The point is, through the power of the mind, I was able to get 200 people to come to Joliet to look at black art. You can never take that away from me. It was an amazing experience. The second art show that I was a part of was in Washington, D.C., and it was also a success. I was in a room with several artists that I respect, people that I've looked at their work, and now I'm in the room with them as an artist. It was an amazing experience. However, I learned from that experience that it was very expensive and that going forward, I will have to do those things in a different way or send smaller art pieces or something of that nature because it took a lot of money to do that. So I'm learning my limitations in the art world. That being said, that leads me to limitations. That leads me to my next point. Getting accepted into a doctoral program. For me, getting my doctorate, it wasn't a necessity until I started to look at, why am I limiting myself to just a master's? After I got my master's in 2020, right, which was another just something to have. It wasn't like I needed it for my job, but I do need it for job security. To an extent. After I got my master's, it was cool for like a year, but then I thought like, man, I enjoy studying. I enjoy reading. And I want to read for a purpose. Reading for fun is cool, but when you're used to school, your mind is like, let's do this thing, right? So I started looking into doctoral programs, and a lot of them, I'm not gonna lie, were not worth the time and the money. However, one popped up, and this is why you got to believe in the power of the mind. You got to believe in God or something bigger than you. The program popped up from a public university, a public, fully accredited university. It's called Penn West University. Now, I wasn't really too fond of paying to get my doctorate, but this school has a military discount. Now, with the military discount, this degree goes from, I think it's like $50,000 to $25,000. Now, $25,000 broken up into 2 years, 3 years for the program, that's feasible. That's something that I could do. Lo and behold, they accepted me into the program. And for me, it's breaking past a limit that I put on myself, right? I was going to stop at the master's, but now, luckily, God has blessed me with the opportunity to get my doctorate. And the doctorate leads me to my next large thought of 2022, which was my connection to things that are bigger than me, right? So my mother would love to have had her doctorate, right? So now I'm getting one, right? And I mentioned that I had a child. I just had a child in September. I want my child to grow up and have her father be automatically, Dr. Clark, right? Now, when it comes to things like when you get into the academic world or even the business world or anything like that, there's always these comparisons people do. And I'm okay with comparisons because I don't do anything to compare myself to anyone but me. But for me, right? I say, oh, my daughter can look at me and be, oh, well, my dad's Dr. Clark. For some people hearing me say that, they're like, doctor of what? You know what I mean? Like, and that's fine. If you have a doctorate, you can treat me that way. But if you barely graduated high school, right? Right? Stay in your place. You understand? There's a difference between me and you, right? Whether you respect what I did or not, you didn't do what I did, so you cannot comment, right? So, speaking about things that are bigger, it's like, I think of, like I said, my mother would love to have had a doctorate, so I got one. My kid looked up to me, and I want her to know that there are no limits, right? Because there's nothing higher you can get than a doctorate. You can differentiate between doctorates, right? Like, obviously, if you're a neurophysiologist or something like that, or a chemical engineer, obviously you put more respect on that than having a doctorate in, childhood education, right? Like, obviously, these two things are not equal. However, when you put them in the category, they are in the same category, right? And I want to speak a little bit about having a kid. A lot of emotions that I never thought that I would have. A lot of emotions that I never knew existed inside of my body, right? It's a completely different emotional reality having a child, and it's really opened my eyes up to certain things. And people always said, oh, well, when you have a kid, you'll understand X, Y, and Z. And I completely disagree. If anything, I dislike a lot of people even more because I'm like, oh, what I was going through as a kid when X, Y, Z was happening to me, and you did nothing. Because me, now that I have a kid, I'm even more in the direction of helping the youth. I already dedicated years to helping kids, and that's something that I always have done, being very generous. But now that I'm a dad, I'm like, oh yeah, this is even more important. So I know I don't understand anyone's selfishness towards their nieces, nephews, cousins. I don't understand it. I can understand not being invasive and intrusive in their life, but when you know that they're going through certain things, I don't understand not extending a helping hand. Being a father has made me more generous and more aware of the wonderment of life. One of the highlights of my 2022 was watching snowflakes hit my daughter's face. It was not the snowflakes were miraculous, right? It was the confusion in her face of what is happening. And then it was the blind child, no, not childlike, the blind child acceptance of just a snowflake melting on her face, right? It was like, it went from, what is this? I've never seen this before, to, you know what? Here we are. I like it. And she's smiling about it. And there's something to be learned in that moment. There's something to be learned in that, right? Just listen to what I said, replay it, and think about that, right? Snowflake hits her face. She goes through every range of emotion and ends with, well, you know what I mean? I'm happy. This is cool, right? Which I think is something that we all need to work on. So I've wasted enough of your time if you even made it this far in the video. Recap of the year. Or let me just end it with the thought of the year, right? The power of the mind is not a joke. You can accomplish exactly what you want, but it's about the levels of severity. That's another thing I've really been pushing this year in my mind. I got everything I wanted this year, but maybe not to the degree that I wanted it. I got everything I asked for, but maybe not to the degree that I wanted it, right? I would have loved to sell all my art this year, right? I would have loved it. I would have loved if the doctorate program was free, right? I would love it, right? But that's not how the world works. So it's a give and take relationship with this thing called life. Other than that, thank you for your time, and we will talk again in 2024.